William Joseph Donovan entered the Second World War with a reputation for courage, independence, and unconventional thinking. A Medal of Honor recipient from the First World War, a successful lawyer, and a skilled diplomat, Donovan understood that modern conflict extended far beyond battlefields. He believed that intelligence, sabotage, psychological warfare, and clandestine networks were essential tools for nations facing totalitarian adversaries. When President Franklin Roosevelt selected him to build a new strategic intelligence system, Donovan accepted a mission with no precedent in American history. Before 1941, the United States possessed no unified intelligence structure. Military branches collected information independently. Diplomatic posts relied on limited reporting, and civilian agencies lacked coordination. The United States entered the global crisis with fragmented intelligence capabilities, no permanent espionage service, and no doctrine for psychological operations or resistance support. Donovan recognized that this weakness jeopardized national security. Modern war required centralized analysis, coordinated, clandestine activity, and the integration of intelligence with strategy. Roosevelt appointed Donovan as coordinator of information in 19. Donovan immediately began constructing an organization capable of gathering intelligence, analyzing foreign capabilities, conducting covert operations, and supporting resistance movements. He recruited academics, linguists, journalists, lawyers, archaeologists, explorers, athletes, and refugees, individuals who possessed specialized skills or unique cultural knowledge. Donovan believed that traditional military structures were too rigid for clandestine work. He sought creative minds who could adapt, innovate, and operate far beyond conventional limits. After Pearl Harbor, the organization expanded rapidly. In June 1942, Donovan created the Office of Strategic Services, a unified command for espionage, sabotage, research, analysis, and psychological warfare. It was the first American agency designed to conduct global intelligence operations. The OSS operated independently from the armed forces, but cooperated with them on planning and execution. Donovan insisted on flexibility, operational autonomy, and the ability to move personnel and supplies across theaters without bureaucratic delay. Donovan's vision for the OSS was broad. He believed that intelligence must inform strategy, not merely support it. He created the Research and Analysis Branch, staffed heavily with historians, economists, geographers, and political scientists. This team produced detailed studies on enemy industry, transportation networks, leadership structures, troop movements, and morale conditions. Their assessments influenced Allied decision-making at the highest levels. By converting academic expertise into strategic intelligence, Donovan introduced a model still used by modern intelligence agencies. Espionage formed another pillar of Donovan's system. OSS agents operated across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, gathering information on German, Italian, and Japanese operations. They observed troop concentrations, monitored supply lines, mapped coastal defenses, and reported on industrial activity. The OSS built networks through local contacts, resistance fighters, and anti-Axis civilians. Donovan understood that human intelligence obtained through relationships, infiltration, and cultural knowledge remained essential even as technology advanced. Sabotage operations were equally important. Donovan's Special Operations Branch trained agents to destroy railways, bridges, fuel depots, communication lines, and transport hubs. These actions disrupted enemy logistics and reduced the effectiveness of Axis operations. Donovan believed that small, targeted acts of destruction could produce large strategic effects when coordinated with major military offensives. OSS teams cooperated closely with the British Special Operations Executive, adopting methods, training standards, and operational doctrines that influenced later American special forces. One of Donovan's most significant contributions was his support for European resistance movements. The OSS provided weapons, radios, medical supplies, and training to groups in France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, Greece, Yugoslavia, and Poland. Donovan saw resistance as a force multiplier. Local fighters could gather intelligence, sabotage infrastructure, harass enemy units, and support Allied operations behind the front lines. The OSS coordinated parachute drops, established clandestine communication networks, and maintained continuous contact with resistance commanders. Psychological warfare became a core component of Donovan's philosophy. He believed that information, rumors, propaganda, and morale operations could weaken enemy cohesion. The OSS produced broadcasts, leaflets, forged documents, and covert messaging campaigns designed to undermine Axis authority. Donovan recognized that the mental dimension of war perception, belief, and confidence was as important as physical forces. His psychological operations pioneered methods later adopted by Cold War intelligence services. Donovan faced resistance from military leaders who viewed intelligence as secondary to conventional operations. He responded by demonstrating that intelligence increased the efficiency of combat power. Accurate information reduced casualties, improved timing, and enabled decisive action. Roosevelt supported Donovan's autonomy, allowing the OSS to develop capabilities beyond the traditional boundaries of American military doctrine. By 1943, the OSS had become a global intelligence service. Donovan oversaw operations in North Africa, Italy, France, the Balkans, China, Burma, and the Pacific Islands. OSS teams infiltrated enemy-held territories, mapped terrain, located defensive positions, and coordinated with guerrilla units. The scale of activity was unprecedented for the United States. Under Donovan's leadership, the OSS evolved into a sophisticated organization capable of influencing events far from the front lines. By 1943, the OSS had matured into a multi-purpose instrument of American power, but Donovan continued pushing for expansion. He believed that intelligence agencies must evolve faster than adversaries. To achieve this, he prioritized training, technology, and inter-allied cooperation. The OSS established schools for clandestine operations, teaching recruits lockpicking, explosives handling, covert communications, disguise, surveillance, escape tactics, and parachute insertion. These training programs produced agents capable of operating with minimal support deep inside hostile territory. Donovan insisted that OSS officers must be self-sufficient, adaptable, and able to make independent decisions under extreme pressure. Cooperation with Allied intelligence agencies was central to Donovan's approach. He closely coordinated with the British Special Operations Executive, MI6, and code-breaking units such as Bletchley Park, the OSS, and so shared techniques, equipment, and operational plans, creating a unified clandestine effort against the Axis. Donovan admired Britain's long tradition of intelligence work, but sought to build an American system that matched or exceeded British capabilities. In many theaters, OSS and SO teams conducted joint missions, combining British experience with American resources and manpower. In the Mediterranean, the OSS supported operations in Sicily, Italy, and the Balkans. Agents provided detailed information on German defensive positions, supply depots, troop movements, and coastal fortifications. In Yugoslavia, OSS teams worked with resistance groups to coordinate sabotage against rail lines and bridges. Donovan valued these partnerships because they multiplied Allied strength. A small number of trained agents, combined with local fighters, could impose significant costs on German occupation forces. In France, the OSS prepared for the Allied invasion by infiltrating agents, recruiting local networks, and supporting the French resistance. Donovan viewed resistance groups as essential for shaping the battlefield before D-Day. OSS teams supplied weapons, radios, and demolition equipment to Maquis units. They instructed fighters in sabotage techniques, coordinated communication networks, and helped plan attacks on German transportation systems. When Allied forces landed in June 1944, coordinated resistance actions delayed German reinforcements and disrupted key supply routes. Donovan considered this one of the OSS's most important contributions to the European theater. Donovan also recognized the importance of intelligence in the strategic bombing campaign. The OSS collected information on German industrial centers, transportation hubs, and air defense networks. Analysts at the Research and Analysis Branch evaluated target systems, assessed production bottlenecks, and recommended priorities. Their studies shaped Allied bombing strategies by identifying critical components within the German war economy. Donovan believed that accurate analysis could amplify the effectiveness of air power, reducing the need for repeated attacks and limiting civilian casualties. In Asia, the OSS conducted some of its most complex operations. The China-Burma-India theater demanded long-range logistics, difficult terrain, and coordination with local forces. OSS Detachment 101, one of the organization's most successful units, recruited indigenous Kachin fighters in Burma to wage guerrilla warfare against Japanese forces. Under Donovan's direction, these units destroyed bridges, ambushed patrols, gathered intelligence, and rescued downed Allied airmen. Their operations reduced Japanese control over northern Burma and supported larger Allied offensives. In China, the OSS provided intelligence on Japanese troop deployments, political factions, and industrial capacity. Donovan believed that the future balance of power in Asia depended on understanding the internal dynamics of China. The OSS cultivated contacts across nationalist and regional political networks, gathering information on military capabilities, political rivalries, and economic conditions. Donovan saw intelligence not only as a wartime tool but as a foundation for post-war strategy. The OSS also operated in the Pacific Islands, where agents conducted terrain reconnaissance, monitored Japanese fortifications, and mapped landing zones for upcoming invasions. Donovan's insistence on detailed pre-invasion intelligence reduced risks for American forces by identifying reefs, beaches, coral shelves, vegetation cover, and artillery positions. OSS reports shaped planning for operations across the Central and Southwest Pacific. Psychological operations. expanded significantly under Donovan. The Morale Operations Branch conducted campaigns aimed at eroding Japanese and German morale. Leaflets undermined confidence in leadership. Radio broadcasts introduced doubt and confusion. Forged documents manipulated enemy communications. Donovan knew that morale was a critical component of war. By weakening enemy belief in victory, psychological operations increased the strain on Axis armies already under pressure from Allied advances. As the OSS grew, Donovan confronted internal opposition from American military commanders who sought greater control over intelligence operations. Some believed that clandestine work should fall under military intelligence, while others worried that Donovan's autonomy exceeded traditional boundaries. Donovan defended the independence of the OSS by arguing that only a separate, civilian-led agency could integrate global intelligence, long-term analysis, and covert operations effectively. Roosevelt supported Donovan, shielding the OSS from bureaucratic attacks. Donovan's leadership style was direct, demanding, and energetic. He visited training sites, inspected field operations, met foreign leaders, and maintained constant communication with his branch chiefs. He valued initiative and creativity, rewarding officers who delivered results. He also accepted high levels of operational risk when the potential strategic payoff justified it. Donovan understood that intelligence success required boldness as well as discipline. By late 1944, the OSS had become indispensable. It coordinated resistance uprisings ahead of Allied advances, provided frontline commanders with detailed intelligence, and conducted sabotage operations that limited German mobility. In the Pacific, OSS operations shaped the environment for major offensives. Donovan's Vishnu Unified Intelligence Service, capable of influencing events across continents, was fully realized. By late 1944, the OSS had reached its operational peak. Its global network extended from Europe to Asia, from North Africa to the Pacific Islands. Donovan's organization conducted espionage, sabotage, analysis, psychological warfare, and resistance coordination at a level unmatched in American history. Yet Donovan continued seeking expansion. He believed that the coming post-war world would require an even more sophisticated intelligence system, one capable of anticipating political instability, managing global power shifts, and countering emerging threats. In Europe, the OSS played a crucial role during the final phase of the war. As Allied armies advanced into France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, OSS teams followed behind the front to gather intelligence, interrogate prisoners, and secure documents. Field units collected maps, communications codes, industrial records, and scientific research. Donovan believed that understanding the structure of the collapsing German state was essential for shaping post-war policy. OSS units exposed underground resistance to the Nazi regime, tracked war criminals, and identified networks that might survive defeat to influence future political developments. Operation Jabora became one of the most ambitious OSS-supported missions in Europe. These three-man teams, composed of American, British, and French personnel, parachuted into occupied territories to coordinate resistance forces and prepare for Allied operations. Jedburgh teams assisted in sabotage, gathered tactical intelligence, and linked local fighters to Allied command structures. Donovan valued these units because they represented the integration of training, analysis, and operational capability. Their impact on German supply lines and local morale contributed to the overall effectiveness of the Allied advance. In Germany itself, the OSS conducted penetrating intelligence work as the regime weakened. Agents monitored the movement of high-ranking officials, assessed defensive preparations, and gathered information on scientific projects, including missile development and chemical research. Donovan saw scientific intelligence as crucial. He believed that post-war national power would depend partly on technology, and he pushed OSS analysts to study German industrial and scientific achievements. These assessments later shaped American decisions regarding the recruitment of German scientists during the early Cold War. The OSS also played a critical role in understanding the movements of displaced persons, refugees, and political groups throughout Europe. Donovan recognized that the end of the war would not eliminate instability. Ethnic tensions, border disputes, and ideological conflicts would shape the post-war landscape. OSS reporting on political movements, underground networks, and emerging factions helped American leaders navigate the complex transition from war to peace. In the Balkans, the OSS maintained extensive cooperation with resistance groups fighting German occupation. Agencies funneled supplies and advisors to partisans in Yugoslavia, Greece, and Albania. Donovan valued these partnerships because they created local forces capable of undermining German control. The OSS tracked political rivalries within resistance movements, recognizing that post-war alignments would influence regional stability. Donovan's teams documented the strength, leadership, and goals of each faction to help American policymakers understand potential post-war outcomes. The Italian campaign provided another opportunity for OSS innovation. Agents infiltrated behind German lines, gathered intelligence on fortifications, and supported sabotage against road and rail networks. The OSS also monitored political groups seeking influence in liberated regions. Donovan believed that Italy's political future would affect the balance of power in the Mediterranean. OSS analysis helped American military and diplomatic leaders understand the dynamics of Italian factions, enabling them to anticipate potential instability. In the Pacific, the OSS confronted very different challenges. Japanese forces defended territory with fierce resistance, and the geography of Southeast Asia, China, and the Pacific Islands demanded specialized operations. Donovan expanded OSS capabilities across the region. In Burma, Detachment 101 became a model for guerrilla warfare. Working closely with Chechen fighters, the unit destroyed bridges, ambushed Japanese columns, gathered intelligence, and rescued downed pilots. Donovan valued the unit's combination of local knowledge, unconventional tactics, and disciplined execution. In China, the OSS struggled with political divisions, limited infrastructure, and competing interests. Yet Donovan considered China one of the most strategically important theaters. He believed that the future balance of power in Asia would depend on American understanding of Chinese military, political, and social conditions. OSS teams in China gathered intelligence on Japanese deployments, monitored nationalist and regional political dynamics, and established networks within cities and rural areas. These assessments provided the United States with rare insight into the internal complexities of wartime China. In the Pacific Islands, the OSS performed reconnaissance missions essential for amphibious operations. Agents scouted beaches, measured tides, studied currents, and mapped jungle terrain. Their reports helped planners avoid natural obstacles and identify optimal landing zones. Donovan knew that accurate intelligence reduced casualties and increased the efficiency of American assaults. He insisted on detailed environmental surveys before every major landing operation. Psychological operations continued to evolve. The OSS developed elaborate deception campaigns to mislead German and Japanese commanders about Allied intentions. Donovan believed that deception, when combined with conventional operations, could shape enemy leaflets encouraged surrender or sowed doubt. Radio broadcasts exploited enemy fears. Covert messages targeted key audiences behind enemy lines. Donovan recognized that war was partly a contest of perception, and he used psychological tools to influence enemy morale at critical moments. As the war approached its conclusion, Donovan increasingly focused on the future. He understood that global conflict would not end simply because the Axis powers collapsed. New rivalries, particularly with the Soviet Union, were already emerging. Donovan pushed for the OSS to become a permanent intelligence institution. He believed that the United States needed a centralized, peacetime organization capable of gathering global intelligence, conducting covert operations, and providing strategic analysis to policymakers. However, Donovan faced growing opposition from military leaders and some members of the Roosevelt administration. They feared the creation of a powerful civilian intelligence agency. Others believed that the OSS's unconventional methods were incompatible with peacetime governance. Despite this resistance, Donovan continued advocating for a permanent intelligence service, arguing that the United States could not withdraw from global responsibilities after the war. By early 1990s, an integrated intelligence agency with worldwide reach, able to coordinate espionage, covert action, analysis, and psychological operations. Although he did not yet know it, his ideas would ultimately form the foundation of the Central Intelligence Agency. The OSS had become more than a wartime tool. It had become a blueprint for America's future intelligence structure. By early 1950s, its wartime achievements were undeniable, and Donovan regarded the organization as essential for America's future security. Yet political pressure, bureaucratic rivalry, and the shifting priorities of the post-war government threatened its survival. Donovan, however, continued working until the final days of the conflict to ensure that intelligence remained central to American strategy. In Europe, the OSS played a decisive role in the final collapse of Nazi Germany. As Allied armies advanced across the Rhine and into the heart of the Reich, OSS teams captured archives, interrogated officials, and secured critical intelligence on military planning, scientific programs, industrial networks, and political structures. Donovan pushed his officers to gather everything that could shape the post-war environment: lists of Nazi party leaders, records of war crimes, documentation of resistance groups, and evidence of underground cells that might attempt to reorganize after defeat. One of the most important OSS missions during this period involved identifying and securing German scientific expertise. Donovan believed that military technology, rocketry, jet propulsion, chemical research, and advanced engineering would define the next era of global power. OSS units monitored the movements of German scientists, collected technical documents, and evaluated research sites. Their intelligence contributed to the later American program to recruit German specialists, laying groundwork for post-war technological dominance. As the war in Europe approached its end, Donovan's organization increasingly focused on political intelligence. The OSS documented the rivalries between emerging factions in liberated countries, analyzed the strength of communist parties, and evaluated public attitudes toward American forces. Donovan understood that post-war Europe would become an arena of political competition. He believed the United States required accurate assessments to counter expanding Soviet influence and stabilize regions vulnerable to ideological conflict. In the Balkans and Eastern Europe, the OSS collected detailed reports on partisan movements, ethnic tensions, and border disputes. Donovan recognized that these factors would shape the long-term stability of southeastern Europe. The OSS monitored the advance of Soviet forces, the reorganization of local governments, and the establishment of new political systems. Donovan believed these developments would define the balance of power for decades. In Italy, OSS officers documented the collapse of the Fascist Party, the role of resistance networks, and the competition among politi-factions seeking to influence post-war governance. Donovan believed that understanding these dynamics was essential for developing American policy in the Mediterranean. OSS analysis helped American diplomats identify potential allies, anticipate conflicts, and avoid unstable political alignments. In Asia, the OSS remained active through the final campaigns. In Burma, Detachment 101 continued using guerrilla warfare to disrupt Japanese operations. Their intelligence supported the Allied drive toward Rangoon. In China, OSS units monitored the disintegration of Japanese military power, the growing strength of communist forces, and the internal tensions within nationalist leadership. Donovan regarded China as central to the future of Asia and believed that U.S. strategy required deep understanding of Chinese political and military dynamics. The OSS also intensified operations in the Pacific Islands as American forces approached Okinawa and prepared for a potential invasion of Japan. Espionage and reconnaissance became critical. OSS agents mapped coastal defenses, studied fortifications, and analyzed minefields and artillery positions. Donovan supported these operations because he recognized that the invasion of Japan would require unprecedented levels of intelligence preparation. Psychological warfare reached its height in the final months of the war. OSS units broadcast surrender messages, exposed military defeats, and circulated leaflets highlighting the hopelessness of continued resistance. Donovan believed that psychological operations could shorten the conflict by reducing enemy morale and encouraging surrender. His approach combined factual reporting with targeted messaging, designed to undermine confidence without resorting to false manipulation that could damage long-term American credibility. Despite his accomplishments, Donovan began facing political setbacks. After Roosevelt's death in April 1945, President Truman reassessed the federal government's wartime agencies. Many in the military and Congress viewed the OSS as a temporary instrument created for extraordinary conditions. They questioned its autonomy, its unconventional methods, and its broad mandate. Some feared that a powerful civilian intelligence agency could erode traditional boundaries between government branches. Donovan argued that dismantling the OSS would leave the United States vulnerable. In a rapidly changing world, he warned that the Soviet Union represented a new and growing challenge. Intelligence, in his view, was essential to understanding Soviet intentions, monitoring global movements, and preventing strategic surprise. Donovan proposed the creation of a permanent, centralized intelligence service reporting directly to the president. His proposal included analysis, espionage, covert operations, and psychological activities, essentially a peacetime continuation of the OSS. Despite Donovan's efforts, the OSS was dissolved in October 9. Its analytical branch moved to the State Department, while its operational units became part of the War Department. Donovan himself was dismissed. Yet his vision did not disappear. Within 2 years, American policymakers recognized the necessity of a unified intelligence service. The emerging Cold War, rising tensions in Europe and Asia, and the need for coordinated global intelligence validated Donovan's warnings. In 1947, the National Security Act created the Central Intelligence Agency. Although Donovan did not lead the new organization, its structure reflected his ideas. The CIA unified analysis, espionage, covert action, and psychological operations under one central command. Many former OSS officers joined the agency, carrying Donovan's operational culture, training methods, and analytical standards into the new era. Donovan became known as the father of the CIA because the OSS served as its direct institutional ancestor. Donovan's legacy extended beyond intelligence. His emphasis on interdisciplinary expertise influenced the development of modern national security institutions. He demonstrated that historians, economists, linguists, scientists, and area specialists could shape strategy alongside military officers. His belief in flexible, innovative operations shaped the evolution of American special forces. His understanding of psychological warfare influenced Cold War information campaigns. His insistence on integrating analysis with action became a cornerstone of modern intelligence doctrine. William Donovan remains one of the most influential figures in American national security history. He transformed the United States from an intelligence amateur into a global intelligence power. He built the institutions, networks, and doctrines that allowed the United States to operate effectively across continents during the Second World War. His vision shaped the organization that would become the CIA, and his methods defined American intelligence practice for generations. Through bold leadership, intellectual openness, and relentless innovation, Donovan created the foundation of modern American intelligence and secured his place as the architect of the nation's first global intelligence service.